Welcome to my presentation on autistic disorder, an introduction to autistic disorder. By the end of this presentation, you will be able to define autistic disorder, discuss prevalence of this disorder, discuss characteristics of autistic disorder, identify evidence-based interventions, and identify adaptations and modifications for autistic disorder. Let's start putting the pieces together. What is autistic disorder? It is defined by IDEA as a developmental disability significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and social interaction, generally evident before age 3, that adversely affects a child's educational performance. It is defined by Hughes as a developmental disability that significantly affects an individual's verbal and nonverbal communication as well as social interaction. Autistic disorder is typically classified as having a below average IQ and having communicational issues, but they are typically nonverbal. Autistic disorder is often referred to as autism. Autistic disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that usually appears during the first 3 years of life. A child with autism appears to live in their own world, showing little interest in others and a lack of social awareness. The focus of an autistic child is a constant routine and includes an interest in repeating stereotypical behaviors. Autistic children also often have problems with communication. They avoid eye contact and show limited attachment to others. In the 1990s, we saw the first legislation which created a separate category for autism and guarantees special education services for this population. As you can see from this picture, there are a variety of characteristics that go along with a student with autism. Their inability to relate to others, inappropriate laughing or crying, poor speech or lack of speech, strange attachment to objects. As well as these, there's also comorbidities within autism. People with autism are likely to have multiple diagnoses. This is known as comorbidity, such as genetic conditions like Fragile X, tuberculosis, physical disorders like epilepsy and gastrointestinal problems, developmental disabilities like ADHD and cerebral palsy. They also have motor skill issues, mental health problems like anxiety and depression, and cognitive disabilities, or difficulties, Students with autism, with autistic disorder, typically have issues interacting socially. Most children who develop autistic disorder have difficulty engaging in the give and take of everyday human interactions. They exhibit poor eye contact, and they have similar difficulties seeing things from other people's perspectives. They also have difficulty regulating emotions. Some people with autistic disorder may have trouble regulating their emotions, which can lead to self-injurious behavior such as headbanging, hair pulling, or self-biting. They also have difficulties with communication. Language development is typically delayed, and many children with autistic disorder will not develop oral language. They are also typically have issues using body language and their tone of voice appropriately. They engage in repetitive behaviors. Common repetitive behaviors include hand flapping, rocking, jumping, and twirling, arranging and rearranging objects, and repeating sounds, words, or phrases known as echolalia. Finally, they typically have sensory issues. Many children with autistic disorder will have issues with sensory input, sometimes seen as sensory sensitivities like hyposensitivity or hypersensitivity, as well as pica when a student will eat non-edible objects. This leads us to the prevalence of autism. We saw a rapid increase in the 90s that continues today. This may be due to the aids and services that were guaranteed to them by legislation written in the 90s. The data reflected in this table shows the increased prevalence of 8-year-old children diagnosed with ASD. Since this data was published, there has been an additional increase of 78% as compared to the 2002 estimates. In 2002, we saw about 0.6 of the population diagnosed with autism, whereas in 2008, we saw an increase up to 1.4% of the population. There's also wide variations among gender, ethnicity, and states or location. For example, there is a large gap in prevalence between Alabama and Utah. Utah has only 1 in 7 children diagnosed with autism, whereas Alabama, 1 in 210 people are diagnosed with autism. There are also great variations between male and female. About 1 in 54 boys are diagnosed with autism, whereas only 1 in 252 girls are identified as having ASD. Though the race gaps are not as prevalent as gender and location, they do still exist, with white or non-Hispanics being 12 out of every 1,000, Black and non-Hispanics 12.2 out of every 1,000, Hispanics 7.9 out of every 1,000, Asian or Pacific Islanders at 9.7 out of every 1,000. Researchers are working hard to find the cause of these increased prevalences. A few explanations are being explored. These ideas are about nutrition, vitamins, and folic acid. I mention this because many of the parents we work with look into this research and implement it to give their children a better quality of life. It is important to understand what the parent wants for their children so we can work better as a team. Finally, the changing definition could account for prevalence increases. As news stories have covered, there has been a change in the definition of ASD. This can create confusion. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I would like to make sure we are all on the same page. The major change to the definition as it pertains to autistic disorder, as Nager states, is there is a new autism spectrum category which is created describing symptoms that usually appear before age 3 and would encompass children with autistic disorder, now referred to as severe cases, plus those with 2 high-functioning variations. What causes autistic disorder? Currently, there is no known cause of autism. Because autism is a spectrum disorder, it is likely that there are multiple causes of ASD, and research is currently being focused on biological and environmental factors. Researchers are looking at possible connections between ASD and the environment as well as biological factors. From a biological or genetic perspective, researchers have observed structural and chemical differences in the brain of children with autism as early as the first trimester's development of the fetus. As far as environmental factors, there has been no research to support these theories. There's also no research to support the connection between autism and vaccines. Thimerosal, which was the ingredient in vaccines to help preserve them, is no longer in vaccines as of 2001. This is also the ingredient that was believed to cause ASD. What we do know, as found by Research Autism, autism is not caused by bad parenting. Interventions and adaptations. Evidence-based interventions. Behavior challenges arise when a student does not like the way they are being supported or does not feel as if they are supported. Applied behavior analysis is one intervention used to curb a target behavior, also known as ABA. ABA is a systematic process of studying and modifying observable behaviors through a manipulation of the environment. The theory characterizes the components of any behavior by an ABC model. A, the antecedent to the behavior, or the stimulus or event that occurs prior to the behavior. B, the behavior itself, which is the child's action in response to this stimulus or event. And C, the consequence, or the outcome or result of the behavior. By using ABA, a behavior plan can be created that allows the student to work on the targeted behavior. Next is discrete trial training, also known as DTT. It's an instructional strategy in which a specific task, also called a trial, is isolated and taught by repetitively presenting it to the student. DTT consists of 4 parts. First, presenting a discriminative stimulus to the student. The teacher may ask the student, "What is this?" and show them a picture of the cup. Next is the occurrence or approximation of the target response from the student. The student would say, "Cup." Third is the delivery of the reinforcing consequence, whether that's verbal or physical praise. Some students enjoy a Tootsie Roll, while other students might like a high five or great job. Some students enjoy a squeeze. The reinforcer that you give your student should be something that they personally enjoy, that they like, and that they would want. And finally, there's the specify intertrial interval, which means that once you've gone through the first discrete trial, you would wait whatever the specified amount of time is before giving the trial again. Finally, there's PECS, and PECS is a multi-tiered program that promotes communication through the exchange of tactile symbols and objects. There are 3 instructional phases of PECS. First, you teach a child to request an item or activity by giving a corresponding picture, symbol, or object to his or her communication partner. We can use the example of a cup. You would have a picture of a cup. The student would give you the picture of the cup, and you would give them the cup in return. Next, you want to generalize the activity by bringing the request symbol to a partner who may be located in different areas of the room. The teacher may sit at the desk, while the student is at their table. They would take the picture of the cup, walk over to the teacher, and present it, and the teacher in turn would give them the cup. Next is discriminating between 2 different request symbols before bringing to the partner. Now the student has a picture of a cup and a picture of an elephant. The student would bring the picture of the cup over to the teacher, and the teacher would give the cup back in return. It is important to create symbols that are significant and personal to a child, which will accurately communicate what the child is requesting. If the child does not like cups, cup might not be the first thing you want to start with. You want to make sure that you are teaching them words that they would like to use. If they like cups, then cup is a good word. If they like chocolate, you could start with chocolate. If they like elephants, you could use the word elephant, and they could get an elephant toy. Whatever you think would fit best for your student. Prompting may be necessary to facilitate PECS, but must be strategically fated. PECS can be beneficial for nonverbal students as well as students who have issues communicating verbally. Let's watch this short video of a student who learned how to communicate using his PECS device.
My name is Orion.
Orion is nonverbal, but he has lots to say.
Do it again. I am 5 years old. A brother named Sarah.
Using an electronic program called Language Acquisition through Motor Planning, he is able to express himself by selecting pictures, and then the iPad generates his speech.
Drink. Apple juice.
Yes, that's apple juice. Good job. High five.
For Orion's mother, hearing her son's own words for the first time was an emotional experience.
He asked for a banana. Oh, I cried. I cried a lot.
So much so that she now has a tattoo of a banana on her arm.
You know, everyone waits for their child to talk for the first time. That's one of those big milestones. And this was just an amazing thing that we could do with the tablet.
Before the kids reach the stage that Orion is at with this tablet, they first learn how to communicate with simple images. They're using a system called PECS, or Picture Exchange Communication System.
She told me, I want to pee. Bathroom? Let's go.
A lot of times children with autism have
Adaptations and modifications. Visual supports are essential, as we saw with PECs, so that the student with autism can process the whole message and allow for an alternative mode of communication. Visual supports assist in routines and have been proven to teach children with autism literacy skills, to cook, to encourage positive behavior, to provide activity schedules using computers and video, and for signaling activity, change, and transition. There's also a few things to consider when it comes to the organization of your classroom. These adaptations or modifications could help run your classroom more smoothly. First, you want to consider lighting. It is well documented that many people with autism have an incredible sensitivity to light. Be conscious of this and arrange your space accordingly. Classroom sounds. We also know that students with autism might be troubled by sounds others often don't notice. Changing your tone of voice can have a positive effect on your students. Safe space. Many people with autism report a need to retreat into private spaces at times. When creating this space, have the students make the choice of what they would want to be included. It's also important to consider the way you communicate, your eye contact. Eye contact can be irritating, uncomfortable, and at times unbearable for students with autism, so we must be conscious of our use of eye contact. They might need help deciphering language. Sometimes when students with autism don't seem to understand a direction, they are not experiencing hearing problems. They are struggling with processing difficulties. Some learners have a hard time making sense of certain sounds, words, or sentences they hear. Students with autism also have difficulties understanding some types of language. Finally, your tone of voice. Experimenting with your tone of voice can help you connect with your students with autism. Consider teaching instructions and strategies. Bring your students' interest into the curriculum. Students with autism often have interests that occupy their attention for long periods of time. Presenting topics they are interested in within the curriculum can help gain attention for longer periods of time. Consider the use of independent work. Project-based instruction is especially appropriate for students with diverse learning profiles because many students' needs and learning styles can be addressed primarily for students with autism because they need to occasionally work independently. Use a range of assessments. The most effective way to gather information on what students know and can do is to use a wide range of authentic assessment strategies, including portfolios, exhibitions, presentations, labs, journals, anecdotal reports, teacher observation, focus groups, daily work samples, and questionnaires. Let's watch this short video about a day in the life of a person with autism.
We are all different, and that's wonderful. Some differences are easy to see. Height, hairstyle, gender, eye color, and so on. Other differences can't be seen, are their influence, here, or special skill. Interestingly, the way we see the world is also different. For instance, what do you see in this drawing? Most people see a duck, but some of you might have seen a rabbit. Whichever you saw, you are correct. This is just a trick drawing to show you that all brains work differently. The brain is your body's computer. It works differently for all of us and controls how you learn. That's why we are all good at different things. How you feel, which is why we all feel different emotions. And how you communicate. Sometimes the brain is connected in such a way it affects senses and how we perceive and read situations and interactions. This is known as autism. Many people have autism, so it's likely you already know someone who is autistic. And for this reason, it's useful to know a little bit about autism. The special wiring inside an autistic brain can sometimes make the person good at tasks we may find difficult, such as mathematics, drawing, or music. It can also do the opposite, and activities we find too easy are incredibly difficult to them, such as making friends. The senses constantly send information to your brain about your surroundings and other people. However, when a person's brain and its senses don't communicate well, the brain can become overwhelmed and confused, affecting how they see the world. Picture yourself walking down the street. This is how an autistic brain may experience the same world. Scary, isn't it? Sadly, in many cases, the person can't say out loud how they feel. So even though there's chaos going on in their heads, they seem okay on the outside, unable to ask for help. We all develop behaviors to help us feel calm in uncomfortable situations. We may look away, hug ourselves, chew our fingernails, fidget, bite our lips, and so on. Equally, autistic people develop behaviors that help them cope with these intense moments. These actions may seem unusual, but they're just their way to feel calm. When they happen, it means they are having a hard time. The kind thing to do is not to give them an even harder time by getting cross, ignoring them, or mocking. Remember, just because a PlayStation can't read an Xbox game, it doesn't mean it's broken. People with autism need friends who are willing to take the time to know them. With good communication and plenty of patience, everyone will be better off. People with autism are not ill or broken. They simply have a unique view of the world. And with a little support from their friends, they might just be able to share that view with us. Autism can make amazing things happen.
I hope this presentation and video left you with a better understanding of autistic disorder and how to approach this community in your day-to-day life. I hope that you could see the different ways that working with a child with autistic disorder may be approached, so you have a better understanding of why you might see the certain characteristics or behaviors that you do, and what is being done to help this child achieve the highest quality of life. Thank you for taking your time to watch this presentation. I hope it was helpful for you, and I want you to remember that we're all here for the betterment of each student, so you are always free to ask for help, questions, comments, whatever you think would be helpful to your experience as an employee here.